Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Cove. My name is Haley Young, and I'm an assistant director within the new venture group here at UCI Applied Innovation. It's my pleasure to welcome today's Lunch and Learn speaker, Paresh Shah. Paresh is the unique combination of an engineer, Harvard MBA, serial entrepreneur, professor of strategy, innovation trainer, mindfulness yogi, and coach to CEOs, celebrities, and other leaders. Shah has been recognized by the United Nations on International Peace Day as a global innovation leader. Shah brings an actionable approach to his clients from his deep experience as an engineer, operating executive, and successful entrepreneur. He founded several successful technology companies, and his thinking and insights have been featured in publications such as Forbes, CEO.com Inc., Entrepreneur, Smart CEO, Killer Startups, and others. He is here today to present the 7 essential upgrades techies, scientists, and other nerds and geeks must master to lead. Welcome, Paresh.
Thank you. Thanks, Haley. Eric? Great. Thanks. How's everyone doing today? How many of you are geeks? Raise your hand. Nerds. How many of you work with nerds and geeks? How many of you can't do without them? How many of you are not nerds? Raise your hand. Okay, yeah. All right. So, I started off a nerd, and once a nerd, always a nerd. Gearheads, we call them here today. Geeks, IT folks, technical people, biologists, scientists, analytical folks. I went to Gifted and Talented Camp when I was in 9th grade, and that was the first time I saw one of those. My teacher was a math professor at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and he's like, boys and girls, I have something to show you. And he brought out this thing that no one had ever seen one before. And it was invented to help vision three-dimensional space. It wasn't invented as a toy. And he actually had, he basically had us pass it around like this. And he would like watch us to make sure we didn't break it. It cost him $200. The Rubik's Cube came out in 1979, 1980 at the Nuremberg Toy Fair in Germany. And I've always been a nerd. I've always been a geek. I've always been fascinated with problems and puzzles and things like that. So the Rubik's Cube was quite an invention, and we got to hold it for like 3 seconds before we had to carefully pass it on because he didn't want us to break this one Rubik's Cube. It was probably one of 2 or 3 in the country. So I also like music. How many of you like music? How many of you play music? Yeah, so I'm a metalhead. I play electric guitar. How many of you know who this band is? Does anyone know this band? Please. Aerosmith. Close. Quiet Riot. Who gets that? You get a prize. Quiet Riot. So Quiet Riot was one of the first bands that introduced heavy metal and what's now known as headbanging. Okay, when I listen to my Sirius XM with Ozzy's Boneyard and, you know, hair metal bands, my kids are like, what's with the Boneyard and the hair metal? Well, Quiet Riot was one of the first bands that introduced this whole new genre of heavy metal and rock music where it was headbanging music, and I was really into it. So as a kid, I was a geek and a nerd who loved Rubik's Cubes and things like that, and I went to Gifted and Talented Camp to figure out how to do, you know, mathematical problems, and I played music, and I did art, and I did drama, and I went to camp for that as well. So, of course, we have to make a choice as kids, and particularly as an Asian person with Asian parents, I had 3 choices. I could be a doctor, which my dad was, an engineer, or a disappointment that starves. So I didn't want to starve, so I chose to be an engineer. So I got my aerospace and mechanical engineering degree, and I worked at Northrop Grumman and actually worked on the radar systems that went into some really cool stuff, like secret things for the Department of Defense, communications gear, radar, and I really was totally all in on the geek stuff. So I became an engineer. I became a really passionate engineer around solving things and technical problems and things like that. And I've started a couple of companies. One was a secure commerce company, which I sold. Another is a satellite company, which currently has 2 satellites in the air, providing all kinds of cool services. So I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a geek. I've then went to go get my MBA at Harvard Business School, and I became a strategist and a consultant, and now a coach to CEOs. So I went from a headbanger or a metalhead to a gearhead to a group head, and now I lead companies, and I advise companies on how to lead their people. And so you might be a gearhead. Again, let me see a show of hands of how many people think there's a gearhead in there. Raise your hands really high. 2 gearheads, nerds, geeks, analytical folks, biologists, scientists, people who like problems. Okay, so you might be a gearhead if you're fascinated with, technical issues, if you're curious about, hey, how does that work? Hey, here's this new thing that came out. I want to play with it. Or you might simply be a gearhead if you see this guy and you go, ooh, I love that guy. I don't know why. I love that guy. Ooh, something about him, right? Makes you a gearhead. It's that quest for something new and solving new problems in new ways, using your brains, using your smarts, using your head. So the years went by, and I watched the progression of other people, myself, my peers, and employees and the clients that I served. And there was a really interesting phenomenon happening with those who were rising in these organizations and those who weren't, particularly from the technical realm. So this is a really interesting number that I came up with in my research, 8.3 million. So raise your hand if you think the answer to the following question is 8.3 million, okay? So I'm gonna give you a little pop quiz, okay? Who wants to take a pop quiz? Ready? The lines of code in the Apollo 11 mission, do you think it was higher than 8.3 million or lower than? So if you think it was higher, raise your hand. More than 8.3 million lines of code in the Apollo 11 space program. And those who think it was lower, I presume, great, lower. Okay, great. I'll tell you at the end. The number of hair follicles in your head, do you think it's more than 8.3 million or less than? More than 8.3 million? Some hands up. Less than 8.3 million. Okay, great. Let's go to the next one. The number of people in Los Angeles. Do you think it's more than 8.3 million? Raise your hands high. Come on, high. Or lower? Huh? The city. Yeah. Okay. All right. Here's another one. The number of Uber drivers in the world. More than 8.3 million? Raise your hands high. Yeah, lots of hands up. Less than 8.3 million. Got it. Okay. If you're an Uber driver. Number of visitors to the Eiffel Tower every year. More than 8.3 million? Yeah? And less than 8.3 million. Okay. Number of people in the KISS Army. More than 8.3 million? Yeah. How many of you know KISS? Raise your hand. How many of you consider yourself part of the KISS Army? Come on. 1, 2. Peter Criss with the star on your face? Gene Simmons, right? KISS Army. There were 145,000 lines of code in the Apollo mission. Only 145,000 lines of code. There's 120,000 hairs on the average human head. There are 4 million people in Los Angeles. 2 million Uber drivers around the world, that's all. They seem like they're everywhere though, And they're all in like these silver Priuses. It's like, come on. 7 million people visit the Eiffel Tower every year. 7 million people. And there's only 100,000 of us that are in the KISS Army. But we're strong. We're strong. So what's this 8.3 million number? It's a big number, huh? It's a big number. More than the hair on our head? More than all these things? Well, guess what? There are 8.3 million STEM graduates every year in science, technology, engineering, and math. There are 8.3 new people getting cranked out every year who are smart, motivated, hungry, young, cutting edge. And so That raises an interesting puzzle. Well, what do us older gearheads do when these new folks are coming around? Here are the countries. China, India, United States, and Russia crank out 8.3 million new graduates every year. New graduate, new hungry people who are in the workforce, along with you. Here's one, Tanmay Bakshi. This guy's really interesting. I love him. At the age of 5, Tanmay fell in love with computers. And at the age of 9, he created his first app. And at the age of 13, he's advising IBM on its Watson artificial intelligence program. These are the new generation of people coming into this world. He's Tanmay Bakshi, the Bakshi factor. The kid's amazing. So what we realized was, hey, just being smart isn't going to cut it. Because I was really smart before when I could do that Rubik's Cube. These kids blow me away. They are amazing, these new graduates, these new learners. So what we have learned in our research over the past 20 to 25 years, working with clients and observing what makes technical people succeed, what makes them innovators, what makes them entrepreneurs that are successful, what makes them inspiring leaders, and what makes them valuable assets to the organizations that they belong to. And we basically have come up with 7 essential upgrades. It's like a virus update or an operating system upgrade that we want to share with you today. We're going to give you a glimpse of it. We're not going to cover it all today, and we'll have some fun with it. Are we in for some fun? Yeah, okay, great. So our research shows that there is the need to continuously transform technical talent into leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and people who can really be contributors to their companies. So who needs this? Everyone, IT folks, scientists, technical people, students, and people who work with gearheads. We see the shift, generally speaking, from the notion of being successful based on your IQ, your head, your thoughts, your smarts, to, over the past couple of decades, a focus on EQ, a little more empathy and compassion. A lot more, actually. And now we're moving to a whole new level, what we call the human quotient. And the technically oriented people and the companies that hire and manage technically oriented people who understand that this leap is happening very quickly will be the ones that succeed, for sure. So what we've identified is what we call it like the jackpot model. Who likes to go to the casino? Who likes to play slot machines? Nobody. My mom will play like penny slot machines for like 5 hours. And, oh, I won. And she'll put the winnings in her purse. It's so cute. So this is a 7-7-7, like a jackpot your career, jackpot your company model. What we've identified is 7 strengths that technically oriented gearheads, like most of us, typically have. 7 strengths that actually serve us well, that give us joy. There's also 7 deadly blind spots. Career deadly. Fulfillment deadly, progression deadly, income deadly. So we're going to cover those 7 blind spots, and then we're going to tell you what the 7 critical upgrades are. And we're going to give you a glimpse of some of those upgrades today. Sound good? All right, great. So 7 strengths. You probably know what most of those are because you are a geek. Most of you are. So let's just go through what we have found. Gearheads, technically oriented people, are really great at problem solving, right? We love problem solving. So here's a problem. You've got 30 seconds to tell us what the number of the parking spot that's covered up by that car is. 30 seconds. Go. I hear 87. Shout out any answers. All right, we're seeing some heads, nods, frustrated, not sure. Let's turn it upside down. Boom. 87, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91. We have to look at things in the opposite way. We like solving problems. That was great. Who got that fast? Fantastic. Had you seen it before? Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being honest. Okay, 87. So, we're analytical, right? We love math. We love numbers and things like that. We're inventive. We solve. How many of you have like a list of cool inventions that one day you're going to create and get really rich? Yeah, come on, put your hands, come on. That's right. Well, good luck to you. You will if you listen to me. And we're independent. You know, we can take a problem and run with it, right? We'll run with the problem. So these are our great strengths. We really enjoy these things. And we're very detail-oriented. Who's detail-oriented? Right? We're detail-oriented sometimes. So here's a quick little fun exercise. If you've seen it before, no cheating. You keep your mouth closed, okay? How many F's, the letter F, are in the next slide? How many of the letter F are on the next slide? You only have a few seconds. Read through it only once. Count the F's. Okay, you have a few seconds. Okay, great. How many people saw 3 F's? Raise your hand. How many counted 4 F's? How many counted 5 F's? How many counted 6 F's? How many counted 7 F's? How many counted 8 F's? Wow, you're pretty detail-oriented. We had like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 6 F's on this slide. There are 6 F's on this slide. Finished files of scientific. People leave out the F, so we need to be very observant. We need to be seeing things broader than we are. We think we're detail-oriented, sometimes we're not. Things skip past us because our heads go too fast. We think too fast. And part of what engineers and gearheads need to do to become group heads, leaders, is slow down, get out of our head, and look at the big picture. So, we're also very action-oriented. Right? We like seeing our stuff in space. We like seeing our stuff in a product. We like seeing our programs running to serve people. So those are 6 of the 7 strengths that we have, and we're essentially critical thinkers. We like to think critically, and we argue for, hey, you know what? I think we should have like an extra support on this chair to make sure people don't fall down. And we'll have like arguments and be critical thinkers to solve problems. So those are our 7 strengths. All right, who's got most of those strengths or lots of those strengths? Raise your hands. Come on, raise them up high, 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 high. Okay, I know you do. All right, so now, these are the 7 strengths of technical talent. Now, what we're going to move to is the 7 deadly blind spots. Now, often the strengths that we have when we work with organizations and HR departments and technical teams, the strengths that we have often are correlated to specific blind spots. When we're really good at certain things, sometimes it becomes a weakness in other areas. So these are the 7 deadly blind spots that will keep you from progressing, from being a bigger contributor in your company, from rising faster, etc. So let's go through the 7 deadly blind spots. Number 1, poor communication. Poor communication. Who's experienced poor communication? Okay, poor communication. Here's an exercise. Pair up with someone next to you really quickly, and if you can't, just find someone next to you. Okay, the person who's closer to the wall over there, make a fist. Okay, the person who's closer to that wall over there, open the fist. Go. Make a tight fist. Make a tight fist. And the other person open the fist. Okay, pause, stop. How many of you are still trying to, I see people, some people trying to open the fist. How many of you said, could you please open your hand? It took a little while though, right? Sometimes we assume, I got to keep my wrist, I got to keep this tight. In other words, I got to force this thing open. Okay, how many of you, your first instinct was, I got to open that hand? Versus, let me just ask him, hey, Rakesh, could you open your hand? Sure. Okay, communication. Okay, we are poor communicators if we stay in that logical thinking, I got to solve this world. Okay, lack of customer centricity. Okay, gearheads, engineers, IT pros, biologists, scientists, and mathematical folks, sometimes lose touch with what the customer's need is. They're like, what does the customer know? Oh man, those salespeople, you know, they want to make money. We got to do this right technically. And they get enamored with the technical sophistication, the technical problem, and lose sight of the customer need, the business need, the fact that this is going to ultimately serve somebody. So that's another of our weaknesses. Micromanagers. How many of you hate being micromanaged? Raise your hand really high. Okay, how many of you love being micromanaged? No hands. How many of you have been micromanagers? Raise your hands. Yes. Often when we are detail-oriented, technically oriented, and we know solutions, we're like, here's how you do it. Someone will, hey, my team member, this is how you do it. Do it this way and use this factor of safety and use this program. And we want to contribute, but we end up becoming micromanagers, okay? Big weakness if you want to be a leader and inspiring leaders. You cannot be a micromanager. Missing trade-offs. Often we get stuck in the technical world and we forget the business trade-off and the human trade-off. There's humans around us who have families, who have lives, who get sick, who have issues. And it's like, let's focus on the problem. So we miss those issues. Weak conflict management is another one of the 7 deadly sins. Gearheads, technical people, tend not to be able to address conflict as productively as they could because of the way we've been wired. Okay, and there's a lot of hashtag me too, a lot of hashtag stuff going on because people are having unnecessary conflict in the workplace. And uninspiring leadership is another deadly blind spot. Who knows who this guy is? Can anyone tell me? Bueller? Bueller? Can anyone tell me? Right, who is it? Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Boring, uninspiring leadership. We must be inspiring leaders today, even if you're leading one person, 2 people, because you're competing with all kinds of amazing creativity in the world, amazing storytelling, amazing inspiration, and ultimately limited creativity. Okay, what I'd like you to do is close your eyes, and I want you to, in your mind's eye, in the next 10 seconds, draw a flying horse. Okay, close your eyes. And in your mind's eye, your task is to draw a flying horse. The fate of the world depends on you drawing a flying horse. Okay, everyone have that flying horse in your mind? Okay, open your eyes. Okay, how many people's flying horses look like this? Raise your hand. Okay, most people's flying horses look like these Pegasuses. They're wonderful, they're beautiful. However, if I were to ask you, how many of you are artists, raise your hand. How many of you are artists, raise your hand? Like 2, 3. If I were to ask my daughter's classmates in elementary school, how many of you are artists? What's going to happen? How many of you are artists? Right? If you were in 2nd grade, I said, how many of you are artists? Show me what would happen. How many of you are artists? 2nd graders, how many of you are artists? Right? The hands go up. So what happened? What happened? You were artists, and now we're not. We start thinking very linearly. We start thinking very systematically. We start thinking in the box. There was a study done. Most people, when I do this exercise with clients around the world, draw the Pegasus. Whoop. Christopher Graves did this research, and my daughter's class and others, if you say draw a flying horse, they will have horses shot out of cannonballs. They'll have horses being lifted by balloons. They'll have horses who are being catapulted. They'll have horses who are flying helicopters. It's a broader way of seeing the world, and that's what we are here to convey to you, teach you, because we must think this way as geeks, gearheads, engineers, scientists, technically oriented people if we're going to solve the big problems of the world today and be the innovators that every company needs. 88% of CEOs are unhappy with the pace of innovation in their company. 88%. And they're expecting that 50% of the revenues of companies in the next 5 years will come from new products, services, and experiences. That's a problem. Unhappy with innovation, and we need it. You guys are the ones to make it happen, and if you learn these skills, you'll be way ahead of the curve. So here are the 7 deadly blind spots, once again, reviewed. Poor communications, lack of customer centricity or sensitivity, micromanagement, missing the business and human aspects as a leader, not just the technical solve, weak conflict management, uninspired leadership, and limited creativity. So, what do you do when your computer is not running so well? You give it a upgrade. So, we're going to give you the 7 critical upgrades. We're going to give you a glimpse of that today. We'll have some fun with it. And then we're going to give you some resources later if you want to find out more. How's that sound? Good? All right. I understand that you didn't. There's your free pizza out there. Wow. This is I got to hold your attention against free pizza. Okay, so let's go through the 7 critical updates, okay? Upgrades. So, the first one, productive dialogue. How do you have a conversation with people that's productive, whether it's around a technical issue, a team issue, a personal issue, and there are specific skills that you can learn. So one of the cool things about technically oriented people and scientists is you guys love learning. You can learn new stuff really fast, right? Computer programmers like, okay, well, I learned this language, I can learn another language, I learned this platform, I can learn another platform, I learned this type of chemistry, I can use it over here. So productive dialogue is something that we really need in our organizations today, and it's a really key upgrade for folks like you. The second one is what we call strategic ability, okay? And we'll do some exercises throughout today. Strategic agility. Often we get very narrow-minded in the way that we see the problems that we're solving, or if we direct our team, if we're leaders in the company, we go, hey, go build a new microphone that does X, Y, and Z. But we don't allow our teams, and our teams don't elevate to a higher level. Does anyone know what this is? Can you guess what that is? All right, let's step back a little bit. What's that? What's that? Okay. Monet, it's a Claude Monet painting, was really the pioneer around what's known as Impressionist painting. So prior to Monet, people would paint very realistic art. It's like, okay, there's an apple, let's draw the apple. There's a person, let's draw the person and make them as realistic as possible. Around that same time, photography was starting to permeate the world as well. So the ability to have realistic representations of things started going up. So Monet was like, hey, let's do this another way. Instead of it being like factual, realistic, in the boundaries, tangible, just as it is, let's step back and let's do this thing called take an impression of it. What impression does it give you? And if you go up really close to it, it makes no sense. If you're too in the weeds, too in the details, it makes no sense. But when you step back and you get the big picture, it actually gives you an elevated perspective. And that's what new leaders need to do today, is get a strategic perspective on what you're doing, why you're doing it, with whom you're doing it, and how you do it. So what we call that is painting Monet strokes as a leader. How do we elevate so that we don't go into the weeds, we don't become micromanagers, and we can become elevated leaders that have social purpose, that are building loyalty and serving customers, being relevant in our community, and creating a workplace that is harmonious and innovative and fun. Okay, so that is one of the skills. It's called paint impressionistic strokes. How do we become strategic thinkers? It's one of the key upgrades that geeks and gearheads need to have. The second one is what we call non-obvious innovation. Okay, the upgrade is how do we become great innovators and non-obvious thinkers? Because obvious thinking isn't going to solve anything. So I run a company called the Non-Obvious Company, and we work with organizations in solving their biggest problems using non-obvious thinking. Because who wants to hire someone who's going to be like, hey, come on in and bring in obvious solutions? Like, boring. So non-obvious innovation, there's a whole bunch of tools that you can use as a technically oriented person or as a leader in a technical organization to help think more broadly. And we give you some glimpses today with some of the little exercises we did. So here are the 5 A's to be a disruptive innovator. We have an annual Wall Street Journal bestseller that we publish, and it's called Non-Obvious. And what we do is we predict 15 non-obvious trends every year. We're actually writing it as we speak. And after this, I go back and I write. And since 2011, we have been predicting non-obvious trends that have actually have largely come true. And so our clients hire us to help them see what others don't see. And we help them, we train them to see things others don't see before it becomes obvious so that they can innovate against those. And some of the ideas we use is things like finding adjacencies to the problem. So if you're trying to create a new microphone, then what might be an adjacent area to look at that's not directly sound engineering and microphones that might lend some insights into how you might be an innovator? Can anyone shout out an adjacent way of looking at it? Something that's not directly related, but sort of correlated to, speakers. Very good, okay? Speakers. Singing. Cathedrals that are designed to carry sound, okay? To an audience. So what might there be that you can learn in innovating a new product or service or experience from an adjacent perspective? We use anarchies. What if you were just to break all the rules and flip the problem upside down to say, hey, you know what? We need this rocket to go as fast as it can, to Mars and back. Well, what if you were to do the opposite one and go, what if we wanted to go as slow as possible and use as much fuel as possible? What might that spark as ideas for you of ways to then solve the real problem? So sometimes you want to break the rules, do the exact opposite, and be an anarchist around what you're trying to solve for, because that might give you some really great upside-down insights. Alien approaches. If an alien were to come down from space and go, hey, how would we build that? Or what is that? So for instance, this is really not a chair unless it's defined by a human as a chair. It could be a work of art to someone who doesn't know what it is. And so how do you see things in a different way? And we give you a whole bunch of tools and techniques to be thinking more broadly and be a non-obvious innovator. Storytelling to inspire. That is another essential critical upgrade that everybody in business needs to have, okay? Today, you must be a storyteller if you want to get resources, if you want to hire more people, if you want your project to be sold through, if you want a promotion, you have to be able to tell a story. Why? Because we're competing with people like this. Actually, we're competing with squirrels. What's more interesting, your boring PowerPoint or whether that squirrel gets run over by a Ferrari? 8.3 million views. You are competing against that for anyone's attention. It's under the table, you know it. They're looking at their Snapchat. They're looking at their YouTube. You're looking at it right now, okay? Unless you're compelling, unless you can tell a story that lights people up, you're lost. And you need to be an inspirational storyteller. So we train people and geeks and nerds and CEOs how to be great storytellers, because there's so much BS in the world right now that you have to cut through it so people believe you. Because you know what? Maybe selling bottled water, Evian, is really just taking advantage of people's naivete. It's Evian backwards. Okay? So we need to be able to cut through and have powerful storytelling as leaders, as inspirational leaders. And one of the methods that we use, and we train our CEOs and our geeks, and we have an online curriculum that anyone is able to access, and students can use it as well. And what we basically do is we say, hey, if you're telling a story, and this came from a good friend of mine, Pete Vargas, this isn't mine. You tell a story, you want to start with the first 15%, you want to open their hearts. You want to open the audience's hearts. Make a connection with the person that you're talking to at an emotional level. Then you want to get into the head. Say, okay, so here's the different things to think about. Then you want to get to the hands and go, here's what you can do today. Here's a skill you can practice today. So they can walk away with that. And then you come back to the heart. So it's like this little archy way of telling a story. It's how Hollywood does it. We teach people how Hollywood scriptwriters tell stories if you're a CEO or a product manager or a marketing manager. So, backwards here. So the next one is one of my favorites. The next essential upgrade is what we call managing the human wild cards. How many of you think humans are predictable? We got one. Actually, how are they predictable? And their unpredictability? So, humans as a wild card are a really fascinating puzzle to solve. Okay, if you're like solving things, it's like, wow, humans are the ultimate Rubik's Cube. They got a lot of dimensions here and it's constantly moving. So how do we solve for that? So we give you a whole bunch of techniques and approaches to manage that dynamic of the human wild card. Here's an exercise you can do right now, okay? And you can take this away with you. I want you to think about one person who you really envy. We call it the green envy exercise. Think of one person who you really envy. Okay? And often envy has admiration in it too. Okay. So what is it about that person that bugs you, and how might you be jealous of that person, and how might the dynamic between you and that person and what that person stands for affect the way you manage, or affect the way you show up at work? Any thoughts? Like envy. Anyone have any thoughts on what envy might do in helping you see the wildness and the unpredictability in people's behavior? Have you ever acted irrationally when you're envious of someone? Okay, so you would be the wild card in that case. So we have a lot of political dynamics in companies, and people are random. There's wild cards. I think something like 14% of the population over the age of 13 is on antidepressants. 1 out of 4 women in this country is on antidepressants. Okay, people are going through their various personal issues. We've got fires over here. We've got, Mercury in retrograde, like all kinds of stuff creates wild cards. And so technically oriented people, geeks especially, need to be open and able to manage human wild cards rather than go, dude, like, we got a Gantt chart, here's the schedule, this is what we have to do, and focused only on the problem at hand. So that's one of the key upgrades. Gearhead to group head is sort of a system dynamic way of looking at this whole thing and bringing it together. And one of the other essential upgrades we call it lifter leadership. When gearheads want to become innovators and leaders and group heads, lifter leadership is something that we have pioneered that is essentially like the 7 habits of highly effective people for today's times. I'll give you a little glimpse of it right now. There was a time when you and I would pretty much be farming all day on our family farms. Okay, that's a long time ago. It was called subsistence farming. We would pretty much be on our family farm, a little plot, all day, all night, as long as we had time, farming, picking crops, planting crops, with the hope and a prayer to God that we would have enough food to not starve. And that's how humanity ran for millennia, subsistence farming. And then some innovative, non-obvious thinkers said, wait a minute, we've been doing this the same way forever. We always plant the corn over here where your grandfather and his grandmother and so on always planted the corn. And over here is where we always had the soybeans. Why don't we do something non-obvious? Let's do something upside down. Let's think more strategically. Let's put the corn where the soybeans were, put the soybeans where the watermelon were, put the watermelon over there, and do crop rotation. Let's pay attention to weather cycles. And let's also listen to that inner voice within where someone goes, you know, honey, I think we should pull the crops down early this year. I think it's going to be a bad winter. Okay, that's an intuition. So they started paying attention to that, and they created the agrarian revolution, the agricultural revolution. They created a whole new world where we could go to the all-you-can-eat buffet and get free breadsticks and salads over at Olive Garden. The all-you-can-eat buffet was not even an idea for humans. Think of it. Think of a time where the idea that you could go to an all-you-can-eat buffet wasn't an idea in human consciousness. And these people created a whole new world. And boom, we all get to eat. And there's plenty of pizza out there afterwards, instead of us having to farm it ourselves. So they created a whole new world, and it changed civilization. Then what happened was people were able to specialize. They were able to do different things because we weren't farming all day. So we get to do other things that we liked. So people moved to the cities, and what happened? The Industrial Revolution. So a bunch of non-obvious thinkers who are really kind of thinking strategically, looking above it all, not being narrow in how things were done, said, wait a minute, instead of making cars one at a time, Why don't we make like a big long line, and your job is to put the steering wheels on, your job is to put the tires on, your job is to put the trunk on, and we have this big long line. That was a non-obvious idea. That was a strategic idea. That was an inspired idea by Henry Ford. And the people who got that, who understood it's about automation, using steam, and getting motion time studies so that we can get more tires on the car faster. Those people became the rock stars of the world. Carnegie, Rockefeller, they became the industrial behemoths of the world, and they created a whole new world that never existed before, where we could have stuff and move things and move people and move ideas, things that were not possible before. So then, geeks arrive, the information age. Who were the rock stars of the information age? Raise your hand if you're a geek, okay? Geeks and nerds really propelled this whole new world again of internet, technology, mobile, and again, they created a whole new world, a world we couldn't even imagine before. Think about a time where you couldn't do some of the things that we just do today. It's like, I want some Uber Eats, it's here, boop. Oh, what's that song? Pull out your phone, Shazam, one button. Ah, Quiet Riot, Bang Your Head. I know that song, and I could share it with a friend in another country for free, and we can hear it together. That was an impossible thing, an impossible thing. Humans didn't even imagine that was possible, and now we do it in an ordinary way for free. So the geeks and the nerds created a whole new world, right? And we're living in it now. Well, now we're in a whole new world. Phase four. Agrarian age, industrial age, information age, and now we're in a new age. It's the next level, and it's bigger. It's about consciousness. It's about compassion. It's about creativity. It's about the connection. Everything is connected. Everyone is connected. It's quantum physics. It's an electric field. We're all swimming in an electric field. There's really no distinction between us. Magic things happen. Synchronicities happen. Law of attraction happens. It's about serving the community. It's about having purpose. So we call this the era of consciousness. Consciousness. That's what's happening right now. Right now. So the geeks and the nerds created the third revolution. The fourth revolution is being created by what we call lifters. Lifters. Lifters are people who are passionate, purposeful, positive, authentic. They want to make a difference. They want to apply their own creativity to whatever task they have and make a difference in the world. And lifters are the new leaders of this planet. Take it here. And lifter leadership really gives you a jump up on what you need to be and practice in order to be a leader for this new era. And by the way, you make 10.5 times the performance if you're in a company that applies conscious leadership practices like lifter leadership. 10.5 times better performance. Why? Because lifters are the best innovators. Lifters are the most engaged. Lifters know how to engage their workforce. Lifters are the ones who build the most trust and believability with customers. They like them. They're the ambassadors. Lifters are most socially responsible. So lifter leadership is really critical to this next evolution. And gearheads really need to get on board with this new way of leading, because the old way of leading, which was a command and control and you do what I tell you to do, that's going out. It's going out really fast. So these are the 7 critical upgrades to go from a gearhead to a group head. How to have productive dialogue, and we train you on how to do that. Very specific techniques and practices. How to be strategically agile and get that elevated Monet impressionistic look before you dive into the weeds. How to be a non-obvious thinker. How to be a non-obvious innovator. How to storytell to inspire people. How to manage those wild cards called humans. Boy, life would be so much easier without humans. And gearhead to group head. So now, there's another thing happening, which is AI and robots. So now as gearheads and group heads, remember we had that young man, 13-year-old Mr. Bakshi? Like, he's coming into the world. A bunch of people like that are coming into the world. So on the one hand, technically oriented people are having all these other, like, there's some really smart people who are competing with them essentially, or they're certainly in the playing field. On top of that, now we have robotics and AI taking a lot of the technical tasks that if we're really smart, like that 13-year-old kid is like, I'm really smart, I'm gonna do fine. AI and computers are taking the high end on smart problems too. So you're kind of getting squeezed if you're only a smart person. Check this out. Remember that first Rubik's Cube that I showed you? This is a computer.
By watching that one, or this one you can just see it.
17 by 17 Rubik's Cube.
So anyway,
there are people who love doing this stuff. A 17 by 17 Rubik's Cube.
Watch it and I'll play some music and hopefully it's a little.
Do you have the mind to do that?
But anyway,
do you have the patience to do that? Are you that detail-oriented? Are you that analytical? We said we were analytical. We said we're detail-oriented. We said we can work independently. Can you spend 6 hours, which is what it took him, 7 hours to get this done? These are the people in the workforce now. Okay, so if you're technical, if you're an engineer, a scientist, a biologist, a mathematics person, your smarts is not enough. Your smarts is not enough. You need to go from IQ to EQ to HQ. You need to become from a gearhead to a group head. And now check this out. This is our young friend Tanmay Bakshi, who I said is working with IBM on their Watson project. Like, who gets to touch the Watson computer? I mean, that's like the ultimate Rubik's Cube for today's times. This is what you're up against.
Outdoor science experiments with Tanmay. Today we're going to be talking about heredity. Then we're going to be explaining how you can evaluate straight-up infix expressions using Swift.
So hello there and welcome to another tutorial. My name is Henry Bakshi.
This is Tanmay. He has 20,000 followers. He teaches people how to program. And he's an artist, he's a storyteller, he can present. This is what you are up against. This is what our technical workforce is up against. More and more Bakshis. His name is Tanmay Bakshi. We are up against 8.3 million people like this. Well, he's a super genius, they're coming. 8.3 million new ones every year. Who's depressed now? Okay, being smart isn't enough. Okay, you can be smart, you gotta be smart, you gotta be cutting edge. It's not enough, and that's why you need to learn the group head skills that we're talking about. 8.3 million people every year, new people, hungry, who can present, some of them, who are smart. Did you see that the numbers had the little exclamation point next to them on the whiteboard? Do you know what that is? What's the exclamation? What's the number with the exclamation point next to it? Huh? It's a factorial, right? Or an imaginary number. This is serious stuff. And he's teaching people. He has 20,000 followers. And he trains people on how to do computer programming. This is what you're up against. And this is why we need to get the upgrades that make us group heads, inspiring leaders and entrepreneurs. By the way, one of the bonus things that we've noticed in our research is that as you learn to be a good listener, be creative, be a good team player, step back from the big picture, etc., guess who else it helps? Your relationships. The same skills are what we need in our relationships with our boyfriends and girlfriends and spouses and teams and communities. The same skills, those upgrades, are what we need in life. So you kind of get a bonus by becoming a leader that's skilled in what it takes to be effective in today's workforce, to be innovative, to be inspiring. You also then will be better off in life. So that's what we have today. I wanted to just answer some questions. And again, the model is about, oh, hold on, let's go back here. Whoop. The model, click, goes back to bringing who you are fully back to what you need to be now to be a great leader. Sometimes we feel we need to be in this narrow channel of, well, I got to study, and be really smart, and study thermodynamics, and study this new computer program, and that's great. But you must not lose sight that it's not all about your head. Sometimes you have to bang your head, like these guys over here, okay? You have to find what you love. You gotta put that into the mix of who you are and go beyond the technical, go beyond the details, go beyond the analytical, and basically be part of a band that rocks it. And no, it's not all about the head. Sometimes you gotta bang your head and get to the heart, from the IQ to the EQ to the human quotient. So one of our Cove-based, our alliance partner is the ENP. I'm part of the ENP group, which Scott Hamilton and others are stewarding. And there's actually an event coming up on January 24th that I think you'll all be interested in. It's the Enterprise Level Innovation and Partnering workshop. And what we're offering you all today is if you go to G2G Academy, Gearhead to Group Head, let's hear it again, Gearhead to Group Head. So if you go to G2G Academy, there's a diagnostic there for free that you can check out. It's go, hey, how am I doing on this scale? We're actually writing a book about this, and we'll send you a free preview. And there's actually a course there if you're interested in checking that out. So we're here to answer questions. And once again, we want you to go from being that amazing gearhead, right? We love gearheads, to more than that, to being an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur within a company. Companies are dying for people who can innovate, and an inspiring leader. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Yes. Yeah, please come to the microphone. Yes. Thank you.
So I agree with the shifts you said. Now a question is, shift 4, becoming more human, takes also a lot of time, and I believe it's a privilege to be able to use your time to become more human.
Yeah.
How can you deal to bring along people that are still in shift 2? It's talking about underdeveloped countries and other sectors. They don't have maybe the time to become a better human because they're more worried about getting food on the table and stuff. How can we close that big gap?
It's a great question. Thank you. How do you become a better human if you don't have time because you're working, you're studying, etc.? It's a great question. I would say from the 33 countries I've done work in with clients, etc., people overseas have a better clue about being human than we do in this country. Okay? They know how to show up and just be present to someone, to listen, to have compassion. Compassion is very important. To trust their instinct and not overthink it and go, you know what, I think he's going to need this, and let's just provide this, and we'll figure out how it's going to work out later. So being human is a practice you can do all the time. And the first thing I would offer to you is the following practice. How many of you have children? Anyone have children? Okay, great. Here's a practice for those who have children. And then how many of you have people in your life who you remind how they should be every now and then? Like, hey, you should do it this way or that way. Here's a little practice on how to be human. When you feel you want to correct your child, or you want to tell someone, hey, do it this way, or I want you to clean up the dishes before we go out, or something like that. When you're in the mood to give a recommendation and solve a problem, one of our skills that we teach you is how do you solve the problem by not solving the problem? How do you solve the problem by not solving the problem? How many of you sometimes are talking to someone and you just want them to hear you as you're thinking it out, and they're like, well, I know what you need to do, and it's very frustrating, right, when you're just wanting to be heard. And so the practice that I recommend you do, and maybe you can partner up with a pal of yours, is when you want to remind someone, say, hey, honey, you should take the trash out. Did you walk the dog? Did you do your homework? Hey, you know what? You told me you'd get me that project on deadline, and you want to remind someone, admonish someone, help someone. Just keep your mouth closed, okay? And watch what happens, and keep a note of this. Because when we are quiet and we don't project, particularly when we project someone's going to be doing something wrong, oh, they're going to be doing that again, let me make sure that, they're not on their iPad. When you think that, you're going to start creating it. And when you speak it, it's going to happen more. And the test is, it's counterintuitive. It's one of those upside down things that we did today, is when you want to correct someone or give someone advice, just be quiet. Just be quiet and watch what happens. I've done this with my yoga students and with various clients. And what we do is we send a little thumbs up on text every time we go, I kept my mouth closed. And guess what happens? You go, oh my God, I was going to tell my son to walk the dog, and I kept my mouth closed. And guess what happened? He walks the dog. He walks the dog. Watch what happens. Do the experiment. If you're analytical, do the experiment. Okay? Take about 30 data points of times you want to tell someone what to do. Recommend something. Suggest. Be helpful. Just be quiet. And I guarantee you at least 5 out of those 30, maybe 10 out of those 30, maybe 15 out of those 30. If you're patient, wait. That person will do what you want them to do without you speaking. Okay? Report back to me. Get my email. That's your homework. That's how you become human. You listen. You tune in. You don't try to solve right away, and let the universe unfold. So it's a great question. Yeah. Try that out, okay? Yes, more questions.
First, thank you. You mentioned 2 elements that I think are kind of polar opposites, and I wanted to get you to help me
Sure.
to connect the dots in between of them.
Sure.
One of them was micromanagement. We
Correct.
all don't want to micromanage.
Correct.
But then if you're leading a group of engineers and they're
Yes.
trying to solve a problem
Yes.
and they're solving it the same old way that doesn't work, how do you bridge those two
Yep.
so that you're not telling them how to do, what tools to use, or try to bring in some sort of innovation thinking,
Right.
but still giving them the opportunity to solve the problem?
That's a great question. A lot of people struggle with that. Thank you, Ron. So what we find is just having some very basic protocols with your team to go, hey, Ron, we want to do this in a new way. So, and you're going to have ideas because you're smart, right? You're going to have, and you're going to offer help because we're smart and we want to be helpful. What I let my teams do and what we advise our clients to do, particularly in the engineering technical domains, is say, here's the task, go off and work on it. Work on it, be open-minded, think about it, and I want you to, before you come to me with any questions, like go be resourceful and see if you can push the limits of your own thinking, and then come to me with, hey, here's some approaches, what do you think? And then, what do you do when that person's talking? Okay, because you're gonna be like, whoa, wait a minute, I wanna do this, I think you can do it this way. You just be quiet. Let them innovate, let them fail, let them come up with ideas, and you're not micromanaging them in the solution, you're managing them in the approach or the process, which is, are you clear on the task? Number 1. Are you clear we want to do it differently than the past? Great. Do you feel you can go run with this for a while? Go run with it. Do what you can. When you get stuck, after you have been resourceful and trying to be unstuck, then come back to me and I will lend my perspective. Try even then not to give the answer. Send them back out one more time and then have them come back. People will do things that are impossible. They will do that. So you can be a micromanager around process and deadlines. However, you don't need to be micromanaging around the solution itself. Great question. Time for one more question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a much broader question. Yeah, there are a significant number of nerds and geeks, but in my experience, there's a much larger population of people who wouldn't fall into that category. A lot of these people have real power and, in many cases, lots of money. So what is their role in the future? You know, when people who are deeply introverted like me improve their EQ and acquire AQ. So, you know, what's the relationship going to be with those individuals who are not previously geeks?
It'll be more harmonious for sure, because you will understand each other. There will be less green envy, because I remember when I was young, I'm like, I'm really smart. Why'd that guy get promoted? I'm really smart. I solved that technical thing. How come that person gets to present? How come that? Why? Because those people were learning the other skills around relationship building, listening, storytelling, being strategic, wanting to get into the customer's ear and the customer's perspective. So it's that envy thing, it's that tension. But once you go, you know what? What has made these people successful, the non-geeks who are in power and who have money, in the cases you mentioned, is they have these older skills. And sometimes you don't need to be the best technical person to advance, as you've all seen. So that's why as we build these skills out, there will be much more harmony across the organizations. And every company needs technical folks now. And the tensions between marketing, sales, finance, the technical teams around the cost, scope, schedule, resources, those tensions will be less so because people will be able to understand each other. All right, well, I really appreciate all of your time, and I will leave you with 3 words for those who are big thinkers in your head. What are those words? Bang your head, okay? It's not all about the head, but the heart. Oh, you can go to Paresh, at Paresh LA. You just find me afterwards, or you can go to G2G Academy or iamalifter.com, and you'll find all of our stuff. If you're a lifter, if you feel you're a lifter, go to iamalifter.com. It's really the future, and I'm telling you today that this new era is happening, and it's bigger than the internet. Consciousness, it's bigger than the internet. It's the new wireless. Great, enjoy yourselves.